Hello, Rob here, and welcome to R&B Reviews. I'm back, and I decided to do a special video. As you know, over the last 10 years, I've seen and reviewed almost 700 movies for this channel. And I was recently going through my list of videos that I've, looked at over the years, and interestingly enough, I go through there and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this movie, Kids Are Alright. Yeah, that's the one with Annette Bening and Julianne Moore, and I remember these scenes. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I remember Rock and Roll. That was Tom Wilkinson played a gangster. It was a Guy Ritchie movie. But once in a while, I come across a movie where I'm like, I kind of remember this movie, but I don't really remember it at all. And there was actually one movie, which I will get to, where I don't remember anything from it at all. So I decided to do a sort of top 10 list of movies that I reviewed on the channel, but I remember like almost little to like nothing of it. So I feel like after rewatching the reviews of some of these movies, I feel like they were forgettable because they have familiar elements that we've seen in other movies, or they don't stand out, or it seems like nobody is trying. So here are the 10 movies that I have reviewed on the channel, because there are videos, but I remember almost like nothing or a couple elements from it. So the first one that I vaguely remember reviewing was actually one of the early videos for the channel. It was Defiance. It was released in 2009, and it starred Liev Schreiber and Daniel Craig as Jewish brothers in Nazi-occupied Eastern Europe who escaped into the forest when they joined Russian resistance fighters, and they build a village in order to protect themselves. I remember Liev Schreiber promoting this movie on TV, but one of the reason why I think I remember this movie the most is because it was like the fourth video made for the channel, and this was the first time we got really bad negative comments. This was also the first time that Dave appeared on camera as a guest reviewer, and this was before he joined the channel full-time as a reviewer. And some of the negative comments we got. Now, I just want to make a disclaimer. I am not a historian, so please don't yell at me, but I remember there were the Bielski brothers. They were portrayed as these heroes that were fighting against, Germans and, Russians or what have you, and there was somebody, I'm guessing, who was from Poland that left a comment saying that this movie was fiction and that the real Bielski brothers, whenever they stole food or supplies, they always kept it for themselves and didn't share with everybody else and all this other stuff. And then they criticized us for saying it was, believable. I mean, we were just reviewing the movie. I mean, we weren't saying this was 100% historical. But I remember I watched the review that we did recently, and I will admit this was Dave's first time, on camera, and he's a little stiff, and me and the channel were still figuring ourselves out a bit. But apparently the film was not as dramatic as it could have been. I like Liev Schreiber's performance, but I felt Daniel Craig stumbled in and out of his accent, and I felt like the performances of the supporting characters were flat. When I watched the video, Dave and I described scenes that we liked, and honestly, I don't really remember them at all. But we both gave the movie a rent it when it first came out. The next movie that on my list of movies that I don't really remember very well was Haunting in Connecticut. This movie was like the fifth video we reviewed. It was also the first time me, Brendan, who co-founded the channel with me, and Dave appeared in the same video. And it was also the first time that we split on a movie. Basically, the summary was a family is forced to relocate for their son who is battling cancer. So as soon as they move into this old house that's close to the hospital, they begin experiencing supernatural behavior in their home, and they uncover the house's sinister history. Now, the only thing I really remember about this movie, other than what I mentioned about how it's historical to my channel, is I recognize the actor who played a minister, Elias Koteas, as being Casey Jones from the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. I also remember Dave and I went to go see the movie. Brendan went on his own earlier that day, and I remember this was before we created the rule where we don't talk about the movie before we start taping, and I was on the phone leaving, my cell phone leaving the theater, and Brendan's like, what'd you think? And I'm like, I think I'm going to give it a snuff, and he's like, really? Yeah. But I felt like the movie was full of cliches, and I could see scares coming before they happened, and I wasn't really scared at all, and there were some story elements that felt haphazard. And I gave the movie the channel's first snuff it, because our rating at the time was see it in theaters, rent it on DVD, and it was rent it and then snuff it. Dave gave it a rent it. He did feel like there was a lot of stuff that was copied off of other horror movies, but he liked the storyline and he liked some of the characters. Brendan gave it a rent it too. He thought it was a good ghost story and he liked the backstory of the house, but he thought some of the characters were meaningless. And The third movie that I don't really remember very well was Men Who Stare at Goats. And this one starred Ewan McGregor, who plays a reporter in Iraq who meets Lynn Cassidy, played by George Clooney. He's a guy who claims to be a former member of the U.S. Army's New Earth Army, which is a unit that employs paranormal powers in their missions. I do remember that George Clooney produced it, and his producing partner Grant Heslov was directing it. I also remember some scenes of Jeff Bridges as a sort of stoner hippie-like character. I don't remember if the movie got good reviews, but I remember being excited to see it. But Brendan thought it was a good ensemble piece, and apparently I thought there were flashback scenes that were better than the ones set in the present. I felt like the tone was inconsistent, and it was Heslov's first directed film. I felt like it needed more of an experienced director, because it was like, was it supposed to be a drama? Was it supposed to be a satire? Was it supposed to be a flat-out comedy? I was unsure what they wanted to do with this film, and apparently I thought it dragged in spots and it took forever to get going. The script does seem interesting, and it apparently did have good satirical moments, but both of us gave the movie a rent it. The fourth movie on this list is a movie called Something Borrowed. I remember taking my now fiance to a mom and pop movie theater that is no longer around back in 2011. It starred Jennifer Goodwin and Kate Hudson. They played best friends, but their friendship is tested when Goodwin's character falls for her best friend's fiance, to put simply. Now, this movie was advertised as a romantic comedy, but to me it might have came across more as a drama. I do remember Kate Hudson and Jennifer Goodwin's characters and how different they were. Hudson was more of a loud, self-centered character, while Goodwin was more of a quiet and reserved one, and I remember feeling both actresses were well casted in their parts. Apparently this movie was based off of a series of books, and there was talk to make the rest of the series, but obviously that did not happen. I guess I felt like the movie needed better editing. I guess the film slowed down, and there's the drama of if the fiance should go with one person or the other was stretched too thin, and there were a lot of scenes of Rachel, played by Jennifer Goodwin, and the fiance going to parties with Hudson's character trying to hide and fight their feelings for one another. And I guess I also was a little bit confused with the flashbacks, because they were hard to tell whether they were taking place in the past as well as the present, because it was very hard to tell the difference with the characters because they looked about the same. And the film felt labored, so I guess I gave this movie a rent it. Now, the next movie that on this list is a film called Priest. It's a sci-fi movie where priests fight vampires. It was released in 2011, and it was based off a series of graphic novels. Dave, for some reason, wanted to see this movie. I didn't, but I was a good friend, and I agreed to go. Based on what I see from the review, it was a good-looking movie. The special effects were very good, and the director was Scott Stewart. He has a background in making special effects for movies, and I also liked the film's allegories, but it struck me that he had no experience in directing the actors. The actors were mostly bland and one-note, although I felt that the female cast members put more into their performance than their male counterparts. For example, the actor who plays a sheriff sounds like he was reading off of a cue card, apparently. The movie apparently gave us reasons why we should care for the lead characters, but they spell it out instead of making me feel like I should care. I also felt like the movie lacked suspense and the action scenes were not good. And I actually went to IMDb to see how Scott Stewart's directing career is going, and apparently he has a limited directing filmography after that. I also remember seeing Alan Dale, who at the time was appearing on a very popular TV show that I admit that I watched called The OC. But it looks like Dave gave the movie a rent it. I gave it a snuff it. Now, this next movie on the list should be kind of interesting. It's another movie from 2011. It's Immortals, which was a 3D mythological movie that starred Henry Cavill, Mickey Rourke, and John Hurt. Cavill played a mortal man chosen by Zeus to lead a fight against a ruthless king, played by Rourke, who is on a rampage across Greece to obtain a weapon, which is a bull, as a matter of fact, that can destroy humanity. Now, like Priest, I like the visuals and creative camera shots, but in the costumes, while a bit over the top, I guess I thought was very colorful. But to me, the actors sounded bored, and no one seemed energetic when conflicts were happening, and I also didn't find them to be exciting. But apparently, I sat there and left the theater without taking anything with me, which sounds familiar. I didn't care about the characters, and the king is doing terrible things, but again, didn't care. And the character apparently does have gods in the movie, but they don't have much to do. Now, the reason why I said this is going to be interesting is when I watched the review back, Dave disagreed with me. He thought it looked good on the screen. He liked the acting. He liked the storyline, even though I felt there was hardly a storyline. Honestly, I don't remember anything from this movie at all. In the original review, Dave and I had a very good argument on the film, and I went on a little bit of a rant about how music video directors don't always make good movies. Dave gave it a see it. I gave it a snuff it, so we had quite a gap there. I'll have to check with Dave to see if he remembers this movie at all. The next movie on the list is Pompeii from 2014. Dave and I saw yet another 3D action movie set in the past. It's about a slave turned gladiator played by Kit Harington who finds himself in a race against time to save his true love, Cassia, who has been betrothed to a corrupt Roman senator while the volcano in Pompeii is exploding. Dave and I, oddly enough, agreed on this one. I thought this one was amusing, although not as horrible as Immortals. Apparently, I felt the special effects were good, but I did find the characters more interesting here and the film itself to be kind of amusing. Kiefer Sutherland, I guess, was the villain in this one, and he talks like a businessman who cares about himself, which apparently I thought was very suitable. Everybody, the characters were very well acted too. Dave felt it started out good but got stupid at the end, and he criticized the movie for the overuse of CGI, so Dave and I both gave this movie a rent it. The next movie on my list is a movie that I looked at the title, I'm like, what the hell is this movie? So after I went and looked at the summary and who was in it, I'm like, oh, now I remember. Now, this was the movie with Al Pacino and Christopher Walken, and the movie was called Stand Up Guys from 2012, and I remember seeing the trailers when it first came out and being excited and looking forward to it. I mean, it was Christopher Walken and Al Pacino. Apparently Alan Arkin is in the movie. I don't really remember him. I guess he's basically the plot line is Pacino plays a former gangster who's released from prison, and a fellow member and friend played by Walken is assigned to kill Pacino. There are a couple scenes I do remember, like there's a scene where Walken and Pacino are eating dinner at a restaurant after Pacino is freed, and basically I remember Pacino be like, come on, someone's gonna kill me. Tell me, is it just say that it's you? And Walken's like, it's me. I remember that scene. And there's also another scene where Pacino is in a confessional at a Catholic church and he's telling the priest all the bad things he did, and then he asks, so Father, do I have to say a Hail Mary or what? And the priest is like, I'm not sure a Hail Mary can save you. Apparently I liked seeing these two actors together, but it felt like they were going through the motions, like this is the upteenth time they are playing these types of characters. Apparently I thought the dialogue was very cliched. The writer, Noah Hadel, didn't really write another script until 2018 when he wrote it for a show called Kidding with Jim Carrey, and apparently I criticized the pacing of this movie for dragging, so I gave the movie a rent it. Grudge Match was another film featuring classic actors playing roles similar to some of their past ones. This one came out in 2013, and it featured Sylvester Stallone and Robert De Niro playing a pair of aging boxing rivals that are coaxed out of retirement to do one final fight about 30 years later after their last match. Dave and I reviewed this movie as well, and apparently I thought it was an amusing movie. I must have liked this movie a little bit more than some of the other films on this list, but apparently they were both Rocky and Raging Bull references. I remember some scenes like where Stallone and De Niro meeting up for the first time at a gym and they start doing the name calling and other things and almost getting into it. And I also remember this was one of Kevin Hart's first movies after doing stand-up for some time. He played a boxing promoter, and the impression I had with him at the time was he was talking like a stand-up comedian and not like a character, although now I feel like he finally has a grip on acting. Another bit that I do remember is when Kevin Hart is talking to Alan Arkin, who I think played Stallone's trainer. Hart makes a joke like, so tell me, what was Jesus like back in the day? I remember that bit as well. Based on what I've seen in the review, I didn't hate the movie, but with some of the movies with big names playing similar characters, you kind of expect more from it. I remember being amused by it. There were a few film cliches, but there were some satirical moments as well. Apparently there's a scene where Stallone and De Niro are going at it in public and people are whipping out their phones and recording it rather than trying to stop the fight. Apparently I didn't hate the movie, like I said. It was amusing, dramatic stuff, and there was some things that didn't always work. But Dave and I gave this movie a rent it. Now the last movie on my list was probably the reason why I created this video. There was one movie I remember nothing about at all. I had to watch the trailer to refresh my memory, and even then I felt like I didn't completely remember this movie at all. The movie was called The Debt. The difference between this movie and the other movies is like there's like there's a scene or two that I remember, or I remember who was in them. This one, I had no recollection of this movie at all. It was a suspense thriller from 2011, and IMDb says that this movie was set in 1965, where three Mossad agents cross into East Berlin to apprehend a notorious Nazi war criminal, and then 30 years later, the secrets of the agents come back to haunt them. And the movie has reliable people involved. There's John Madden, the director. The script was written by Matthew Vaughn and Jane Goldman. It starred Helen Mirren, Sam Worthington, Tom Wilkinson, and even Jessica Chastain. It's apparently based on a book, and watching the video, I didn't think the movie was predictable, but it seems like a movie you have to watch to get everything multiple times. Apparently, I didn't get into the characters until the flashback. The scenes in 1997, I felt that weren't as good as the scenes from 1965, because those scenes apparently had more suspense and a better story, and the 1997 one apparently wasn't very interesting to me. Apparently, I liked how the characters changed as a result of their mission in 1965, and apparently, I recommended this movie as a see it in theater experience, which I found interesting. Well, that's my list of the movies that I've reviewed on the channel, but I remember either nothing or only a couple things of, and like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it seems like the reoccurring theme in some of these movies was the people were either not trying hard, you didn't have an experienced director that could make the movie interesting, or the dialogue was cliched, or there was elements that were familiar. So do you remember any of these movies? And if so, what did you do? What do you remember about them? Or is there a movie that you remember watching in the theaters or perhaps at home and you're like, I remember seeing this movie, but I don't remember anything from it? Go ahead and post your comments below and let me know, and let me know what you thought of the movie, or the video, I should say. Thank you very much for watching, and please check out some other reviews that you can watch from everything from contemporary movies to classics and other specials like this one. And if you're interested, please hit the subscriber button, and feel free to get notifications by hitting that bell as well. Thank you very much for watching.